Medusa Head. Cutting off Medusa's head. Direct intervention with inner reptile drives of appetite and aggression. This is a moment of empowerment when you can use your will and intent to transform yourself. Shield yourself from the Medusa head, a reptile brain dominated psyche. Our appetites and fight or flight reflexes all too easily take us over. According to some evolutionary biologists, marsupials, like kangaroos, are limited in their possible evolution because they lack the corpus callosum, the dense bundle of neurons connecting the hemispheres via um, connecting the two hemispheres vital to superior intra-brain communication. These evolutionary biologists further speculate that Homo sapiens may also have a brain communication problem and that could lead to our extinction. We have poor communication between our neocortex, our center of higher thinking, and our brain stem, the reptile brain that governs appetites and aggression. Anyone who has tried to break a physical addiction or even go on a diet discovers how tough it is to get these parts to work together. Headline news is largely composed of variations on the theme of higher thinking being impotent to restrain territorial aggression and other reptilian drives. But there is more in heaven and earth than is dreamt of in the philosophy of neurological materialists and fatalistic observers of human history. As William James said, all that is necessary to disprove the notion that all crows are black is one white crow. If any human being has ever resolved this problem, then the possibility is open for you not to be ruled by your reptilian aspects. So this problem that could be fatal to the species in the aggregate, in that we now have ever more lethal technologies that are increasingly democratized and available to people who may not have infinite resources, that could be a species-ending event. But for you as an individual, we certainly know that there are white crow individuals who have transcended that reptile brain domination, and therefore it is possible for you to transcend it. Transcending, by the way, includes that which is transcended, and we see that even in the brain structures. The neocortex does not replace the brainstem, it sits on top of it. So transcendence is inclusive of the earlier structures. Free will is more rare and more fragile than some presume. Now, this is a controversial topic. I'm open to being disproven. I know that there are idealists like Bernardo Castro, even who's not a neurological materialist, but says we don't have free will. But we need to live our lives as if we had it. I think we do. When you take your philosophy and put it into the real world and it destroys the real world, then there's probably something wrong with it. Organisms like us are avatars made by the universe and that actually work and walk and talk. So whatever secrets there are in the universe, they must also be included in our workings as well. And so if we eliminate the idea of free will, then we have no reason to have murder trials, because how can we blame people who have no free will? And society can't work without holding people accountable for things like murder. So to me, that it's maybe a pragmatic argument argues for free will, because in practice we have to assume people have free will and hold them accountable for it. Anyway, but based on the work of Gurdjieff, for example, it's all about how to become unmechanical. Free will is not easy to have. You have to undo a lot of mechanical patterning and conditioning. You certainly have to get past the reptile brain. I don't think that scorpions and reptiles have free will. At least not very much. I mean, it's hard to say. You know, when they did an experiment with fruit flies, where they would have put them equidistant between two escape paths, there would be a moment of hesitation, as if the fruit fly were thinking about it. But I don't really think that life on that level has very much free will at all. And even human beings, I think, have to work to be able to be unmechanical enough to actually choose something. So it's hard work to get past that reptile part of the brain driving you. So, and in some cases, you almost can't. Like, for example, breathing is subject to voluntary and involuntary nervous system. So you can hold your breath for a little bit, but then something is going to force you to breathe. The involuntary nervous system, in other words. So I feel you do have a choice. Anyone that has the neurological resources and the consciousness to read this card has the option to become a white crow. When possible, avoid taking significant actions while in a state of agitation. Do a searching, fearless, compassionate, calm examination of your motives and actions. Hold everything to the standard of what you will remember well in your deathbed. The Medusa head derives from the Gorgon of Greek mythology as an example of the devouring mother archetype. The devouring mother could take the form of a destructive person, an addiction, as well as many other forces. It doesn't talking about an actual mother. It's an archetype, and it could apply to many things. A little bit of white powder that crosses the blood-brain barrier and thereby seizes power would be a perfect example of a devouring mother. The meaning I derive from the Medusa head is one I have assigned my own interpretation of a head with writhing snakes coming out of it. I interpret the head of writhing snakes as a dickhead, meaning someone whose higher cognitive functions, this head, have been overtaken by lower reptilian drives, a lower head in males. Related to brain anatomy, this would be the brain stem overcoming the neocortex. So that'll happen with if I try and hold my breath. But it can also happen in a crime of passion, for example. I also interpret the mirrored shield Perseus uses to see the Medusa and slay her without turning to stone as the self-reflective metacognitive function associated with the neocortex of an evolved psyche. So the shield is like by being able to reflect, which scorpions and fruit flies presumably cannot do, we have the ability to not be made rigid and mechanical by the reptilian drives. Sufficient awareness of our reptilian drives and will can allow us to transcend them. Remember that transcendence includes, rather than permanently separates from, that which is transcended. Similarly, our neocortex is associated with transcendent cognitive functions of higher thinking, such as metacognition. Consider this an auspicious time to polish the shield of metacognition, especially awareness of reptilian drives warping our thinking, and to use the sword of our will to cut off Medusa's head by keeping ourselves from mindlessly acting out our reptilian drives.